everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
The environment that's been created is one that's very conducive to doing the same kinds of research and get the same kinds of breakthroughs that SRI and Park and others have. And I think that starts with the leadership at the top and a commitment at the top. And certainly the leadership in Abu Dhabi and in the UAE is committed to an innovation agenda. And they're committed to, as you can see, by the formation of ATRC and TII, and the resources that have been provided to do that. We also, I think, are able to attract people because we work on very difficult problems. And they're able to work on those problems with peers from around the world. And we like to do that in what we call a more or less frictionless bureaucratic environment in one of the safest cities in the world. And so we've been able to attract literally the best and brightest from around the world as we've staffed up the 7 initial centers and then the 3 new centers, which are propulsion and space, biotechnology, and renewable energy and sustainability, which I think also speaks to our responsiveness to the changing world and where the focus of the problems today lie.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Ray Johnson, CEO of the Technology Innovation Institute, also known as TII. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Scott.
So as part of the Abu Dhabi government's Advanced Technology Research Council, the Technology Innovation Institute that's based in Abu Dhabi, research fields such as quantum computing, autonomous robotics, to cryptography, advanced materials, digital science, to even directed energy and secure systems. Can you tell us more about your center?
Thanks, Scott. It's a pleasure to join you today. Yes, as you mentioned, under the Advanced Technology Research Council, which is a government body, are 3 entities, and they're designed to really be the path to create a pathway from the beginning to the end, from the ideas to commercialization of those ideas. TII is the R&D organization, and we have currently about 550 people from 62 nationalities, so it is clearly a global institute. The partner organization is Aspire, and Aspire is a business development and program management institute that helps us connect to the customers in 6 particular sectors that we've defined as priority sectors. Those sectors are healthcare, sustainability, energy and the environment, food and agriculture, aerospace and space, security and defense, and transportation. And they then bring those problems back to TI and we create solutions. To help us with the commercialization piece is also an organization called Venture One, which you can think of as kind of a more classic incubator where our technologies will go in there and be spun out. And as you mentioned, you hit some of the important centers. Happy to talk about more of the details there, but I think the way to think about how the organization was formed is to look at big problems like the UN SDGs. And how can we work on solving those problems? And in the process, transform the economy of Abu Dhabi and the UAE from a commodities-based economy to a knowledge-based economy.
You know, we've had on our show, I think the president from SRI, for instance, the Stanford Research Institute, and then of course you have other very well-known entities like Park that was spun out of Xerox, for instance. And a lot of these organizations have been operating in a kind of a nonprofit context, but really have done a tremendous amount of work, really in terms of working alongside IEEE and other inventors and researchers to really create a cutting-edge technologies that eventually became commercialized, as well as being able to actually help their clients. So we've seen that model works. And I wonder, one of the challenge, of course, is trying to replicate models in different parts of the world where maybe the environment's different. So I wonder how you've, over the years since you've been operating TII, have you had to adjust it culturally and geographically to suit the objective, but also the capability and the nuances specific to Abu Dhabi?
Right. Right. Well, I think the environment that's been created is one that's very conducive to doing the same kinds of research and get the same kinds of breakthroughs that SRI and Park and others have. And I think that starts with the leadership at the top and the commitment at the top. And certainly the leadership in Abu Dhabi and in the UAE is committed to an innovation agenda. And they're committed to, as you can see by the formation of ATRC and TII, and the resources that have been provided to do that. We also, I think, are able to attract people because we work on very difficult problems. And they're able to work on those problems with peers from around the world. And we like to do that in what we call a more or less frictionless bureaucratic environment in one of the safest cities in the world. And so we've been able to attract literally the best and brightest from around the world as we've staffed up the 7 initial centers and then the 3 new centers, which are propulsion and space, biotechnology, and renewable energy and sustainability, which I think also speaks to our responsiveness to the changing world and where the focus of the problems today lie.
Oh, absolutely. And those are some of the areas that we look at directly as well. Just in terms of a little history, in 2020, TII granted $2.3 million to fund a research group at Purdue University to explore the secure and efficient operations of drones. And about the same period, TII also announced collaboration with Virgin Hyperloop to explore and implement localization of futuristic transportation method. Can you tell us more about these and other initiatives and what has happened since initiating some of these projects?
Sure. The relationship with Purdue is in the Secure Systems Research Center, and it has to do with securing devices as well as securing autonomous systems. So autonomous systems, we've begun to rely more and more on autonomous systems. As you know, they've become a major part of our life. And in doing so, we've talked about the threat surface area that's increased because of bring your own device and because of COVID and everybody working from home. Well, certainly in the autonomous world, we have to worry about that surface area of attack as well. And so this work that's been done with Purdue and others has been to harden the hardware and software components of autonomous systems, as well as the communications channel, so that it makes it very difficult for an adversary to do nefarious things, to take control of the system or to gather the data. So that's the first area. And like I said, we've been working with Purdue and others in that area. And then on the Hyperloop, that's a work in progress. We formed an early partnership with them, so that is under development. In the area of autonomous systems, though, I think one of the interesting things that we've done, in the Autonomous Robotics Research Center, we work on swarming. We work on GPS-less navigation, which is very important in a GPS-denied environment, whether that's because of natural causes or nefarious causes. We took part in the autonomous Indy race in Indianapolis in the fall of last year, and then repeated that exercise at the Las Vegas Speedway at the CES event. And we were able to reach, with that autonomous vehicle, 272 kilometers an hour, while at the same time passing another vehicle. And so you can see from that work that we're pushing the envelope of autonomy in an environment like a high-speed race, so that you can learn from that and then bring that back to more everyday uses in a variety of sectors that we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think converting to miles per hour for the U.S. here, 139 miles per hour, you're talking about very extreme situations that has to do with motion planning in a very dynamic fashion.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that I'm trying to understand is IP and patent creation. So in the case of funding other research, as well as academic universities, for instance, when the work comes out, who has ownership of that? And ultimately, does TII have the right to be able to actually use that for commercialization?
We try to be dynamic to the situation. And in many ways, it depends on the particular business model and who's providing the majority of the funding, et cetera, and to be fair in that process. It is, of course, of our interest, of our great interest, to create IP. As we solve these problems for these 6 sectors I talked about, we also want to create this innovation ecosystem in the region, right? We want to have the UAE be seen as a place where this innovation ecosystem is taking hold and is growing. In order to do that, IP is an important component. And so IP is important to us, while at the same time, we want to take a pragmatic approach and realize that in every partner that we partner with around IP creation has the same interests in IP. So as long as we're able to come to what we think is a reasonable agreement based on funding. So in other words, if we provide all the funding, we're probably going to have a different kind of IP agreement than if it's split funding or another way of getting the project going. But we do try to take a fair and pragmatic approach to that, as opposed to an organization who might say, we're funding the work and therefore all the IP is ours. We don't take that stance. We try to be fair in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable approach. Now, changing topics to language is that most people may not really understand that a lot of the advancements in AI, especially when it comes to natural language processing, is heavily focused on the English language, but there's very limited Arabic content and certainly machine learning training. TII, I believe, is one of the first and maybe the largest developer or designer of Arabic NLP that has some 10 billion parameters. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yes, that project is called Noor, and it is the largest Arabic language translator, if you will, AI-based translator using large language modules and models that have enabled us in the billions of training, billions of data that have been used to train the module. It's performing quite well. That is the beginning of this particular center is actually quite new. And so this was one of the first things that they did. And the Professor Marwan, who leads that center, is an expert in AI, and he brought with him the ability to hit the ground running, if you will. And so Noor as a project has been very successful with the partners that we brought in to perform that work. But it's just the beginning. I'd encourage you to watch this space, because the large language modules models that we're going to be developing will enable us to even take additional steps in this regard.
And again, I think whoever is really leading in that effort, especially when it comes to Arabic content, is going to have huge leverage in terms of potential threads of commercialization, because again, AI, I think, has a lot more potential in the Middle East than even other areas, just because it's just still fairly burgeoning. And I think there's many opportunities.
You're right. And with that in mind, the way we have thought about the AI component, we do have one of the centers that has a very large AI component. So there's a vertical component of AI where we're going to do deep level research, but we also see AI working horizontally across the centers. So that center supports AI research and development across the other 9 centers.
Yeah. So clearly Abu Dhabi wants to position itself as a new Silk Road for the knowledge economy. I get that. I think one of the things that I think, I'm kind of curious from a kind of transparency aspect is that it's a relatively small region, right? And it's not highly populated, and really the population is really more foreigners or international people that are working in that region. So what is being done for the local citizens to uptake or step up their human capital?
I guess it's a great place to work, is how I would put it. You're right. Over 80% of the population of the UAE are expats, and so I think what we see in the government in the 2nd of December of last year, the UAE celebrated its 50th year anniversary. And if you look at what happened in that 50 years, the transformation, if you will, of the country, if you've been to Dubai, especially, and also Abu Dhabi, you can see that transformation in the economy. And they've done that with the help of expats who've come in to help the country. They recognize the value of the people who are in the country, working in the country. And so as an example, I think, of the kinds of changes that they've supported, a few months ago, I don't remember the exact date, but a few months ago, we changed the work week, which had been a Friday and Saturday off, which aligned well with Muslim tradition and the need for prayers on Friday, but it didn't align well with the work environment of the rest of the world. And so the government of the UAE changed the weekend to Saturday and Sunday to align more with the rest of the world. And I think this is an indication of the kinds of steps that they're willing to take to create an environment that's conducive to global work and global development.
Okay, I'm going to kind of introduce some things that may be a little bit, different. Maybe you weren't expecting. Is that, I'm originally from South Korea, and when we came out of World War II, and of course the Japanese colonization, and then the Civil War with the North, backed by China, by the time Korea emerged out of that in the 60s and eventually the 70s, there was really nothing. I mean, South Korea was really right there with sub-Saharan African countries from a per capita as well as intellectual human capital. Right. They had to make a very intentional effort to seek out Korean nationals or Korean descendants all over the world that had PhDs and bring them back to their country to start building out educational institutions. And then, of course, over time, they sent their citizens abroad to accumulate and acquire new higher levels of education, particularly PhD. So that's really been I think, core of the strategy that South Korea has employed. And of course, we've seen how that has really benefited the nation as well as Singapore, for instance. Going back to the UAE and Abu Dhabi, in that region, again, there is, of course, a lot of local citizens that are studying in the US, studying in EU. But I'm just trying to understand how systematic is that process in terms of the local citizens, not the expats, but the local citizens acquiring that information, that knowledge and expertise and bring it back to their home country to actually rebuild the future. And keep in mind, anecdotally, I think there has been research that's come out recently that in that region, particularly Saudi Arabia, there's a highest level of diabetes, and that is a reflection of the culture and the lifestyle and really, the luxuries, frankly. And that permeates into also ambition in terms of research as well.
Yeah. By the way, I lived in South Korea for 3 years, so I'm and also during a period of time when a lot of that transformation was taking place. So I'm very familiar with that transformation that took place. And education, especially advanced education in the STEM fields, played an important role as they transformed the economy of the country. And so we are doing our part, I would say, to help that process. First of all, when you look at the leadership of the country, when you look at the ministers who are in these positions, what you find is that they're generally young in terms of how you would think about the age of ministers. They're generally extremely well educated. They're very articulate, they're very strategic, and they're very smart. And so the very leadership of the country is the kind of person that you like to see develop within the country. And so we have a program where we are currently sending over 100 Emiratis on 2 master's and PhD programs to top universities around the world so that we can do exactly what you say, do our part to raise the level of average education in the country. And then when these students, these top students in the universities in the UAE come back from these world-class educational institutions with those advanced degrees, they then can join places like TII, other research institutes, begin to teach in a university. And again, it's kind of train the trainer, raise the level of capability on the academic front within the country. And so while there are a number of expats in the country, there, without drawing too much of a contrast to Saudi Arabia, there is a dedication to the country that is enabling the nationals in the country to grasp education as an important component and to become more well educated so that they can help their country grow in the regards as you mentioned with South Korea. As an example.
And I would agree. I think even from my travels and exposure in that GCC region, I've seen how much more progressive UAE and Abu Dhabi and Dubai are relative to its neighboring countries. Now, of course, in the neighboring countries like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, you have issues of large growing masses of youth that are undereducated and underemployed. and really they depend on the subsidies to survive to a great extent. And I wonder what's being done specifically in that region to help the youth so that they have a path to upward mobility.
I'm not able to comment on what's being done in the other countries, but I will say that the educational system in the UAE for nationals and expats is excellent. There are international schools and educational opportunities that abound. So I think, looking at that opportunity, it's great, and you can see the results that have taken place there. But I'm not able to comment on other countries in the region.
Yeah, absolutely. Now again, I recognize that, but at the same time, there is quite a bit of ambition and capital and work in progress in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as we speak. And there's a very large capital project, but there's also ambition to become more like Dubai, as well as to institute. Of course, they've had I think one prominent science university there for some time, but they're also trying to rival that as well. And I wonder how some of their efforts is pulling some of the talent away.
We haven't seen that happen yet. Of course, we've had communications with some of the groups in Saudi Arabia who have similar kinds of programs, not exactly like TI, but similar to TI. But we haven't seen either from nationals or from expats a talent drain given that exchange.
Understood. Can you talk about how you are continuing to partner with U.S. and EU research entities, and what are some of the areas that are underway currently that you haven't already discussed?
Yes, I think from a partnership point of view, I believe we have something like 58 agreements now with 24 universities around the world. Many of those universities are in the U.S. Some of them are in Western Europe as well as other places in the world. So we take a global view to university research and partnerships. The U.S., of course, has great institutions, and we have a number of partnerships with U.S. institutions. In fact, I'll be traveling to the West Coast and have some meetings with Caltech over the next few weeks where we'll be discussing some research agreements with them. I've also visited a number of other universities in and around the East Coast that occurred over the last few months. So we continue to look for partners in research, and we do that, of course, in the U.S. The quality of the educational systems and research universities is great there, but it's also great around the world. So we have partnerships with universities in many regions of the world as well.
Absolutely. Now, a lot of the research areas that, again, they're fairly broad, but a lot of those areas are also being covered by other institutions, academic as well as research and NGOs. But specific to that geography, what are the areas that is specifically very important because of potential comparative advantage aspects? So, for instance, in the case of, let's say, Saudi Arabia, as they eventually have to transition from fossil fuels to other forms, a lot of the know-how, the capability that they built over many, many decades is very directly applicable to, for instance, mining. Including mining on the moon, mining on asteroids, certainly lunar ice, for instance, makes a lot of sense, for instance. For Abu Dhabi and Dubai, where are the areas that they believe are really the sweet spots of research and development?
Well, we think that the 10 centers that we put in place really correspond to the areas that are going to be important in the future. You hit on some of those when you started talking. Quantum computing is one of the areas that we're working in 3 areas of quantum information science: quantum sensing, quantum communication, and of course quantum computation. And we do that with partnerships with people around the world. That's a change the world kind of activity that will take place. I think the biotechnology center that is new is also, we can't think about the world today without thinking about biotechnology because of the last 2 years. But biotechnology offers not only the protection of people, but it also offers hope for personalized medicine and using bioinformatics and moving away from small molecule chemistry to different kinds of medicine. I think autonomy and robotics, of course, the Autonomous Robotics Center is very important. We have partnerships with that center, with universities around the world. And we kind of talked about the fact that the world is becoming very autonomous, from automobiles to drones to other things. Robotics plays an important role there. Renewable energy and sustainability, you can't think of anything more important today. Look at the price of energy, look at how it's affected the inflation rate of one of the components of inflation rate around the world. So we know that that's also a very important piece. And it might surprise you possibly to think about a country like the UAE that has a 50-year plan to become independent from fossil fuels, to become 100% renewable, like other regions of the world are focused on. So digital security is another one. As we talked about, the surface area of attack is increasing. So cybersecurity and the security of unmanned systems is very important. And then finally, I just watched an event from Paris, a tech event from Paris. I think it was Viva Tech was the name of it. And in there, they were talking about AI as being the most important technology for the next 50 years. I don't know if it's the most important technology, but it's certainly a very important technology as it applies to many of the other areas. And I think you mentioned the language as an opportunity, but we will continue, I think, to see moving beyond simple machine learning and pattern recognition to these large language models and other activities in AI that are going to make it much more supportive to the human race and our existence.
Well, that's music to my ears. And again, those are the very areas that we focus on as well. Last question for you is lessons learned that you can share either from TII or from your previous work.
Well, I think the most important lesson that I've learned in my career, both in the Air Force, where I served for 21 years, also at Lockheed Martin Corporation, where I was for 9 years, and that's the importance of people. And, I was so delighted when I came to TII that the quality of the researchers, the quality of the people, the dedication of the people, it's amazing. And especially in the areas of STEM fields, research and development, talented people are going to make a difference. I used to say, 10% of the people create 95% of the innovations in the world, or maybe it's 5% of the people. So it's a very small group of very talented people that change the world. And I'm happy to say that TI has a number of those that I am fortunate enough to work with.
Wonderful. So with that, I have been joined by Dr. Ray Johnson, CEO of the Technology Innovation Institute. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.